Jackie Hoffart is a short filmmaker, comedy producer and host, comedian and writer who lives on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, also known as Vancouver. Jackie served as a judge for the JUNO Comedy Album of the Year category in 2020. They created a Telus STORYHIVE-funded docu-series called YVR Funny, featuring 8 Vancouver comedians performing stand-up and giving intimate interviews. The first season is now live on YouTube, and the second season is in production, and you can find it on Jackie's website, jackiehoffart.com. Welcome, Jackie.
Hello.
Hey. Hi,
Thank
Jackie.
you for having me.
Thank you for coming.
So happy to have you here. It's like we've had you here before. Okay, that's an inside joke for people listening. But you're not, by the way, our first Vancouverite guest, but you are definitely our first stand-up comedian from Vancouver, and to the best of our knowledge, the first Juno Awards judge. How did you feel when you found out you were going to be a Juno Awards judge? What an honor.
Honestly, I thought it was a joke. I thought maybe I was being trolled. I wasn't sure. Like, I got the email and I was like, I couldn't believe it, to be honest. But at the same time, I was really honored. I was really flattered. There's a bit of a process. So first you get nominated, and then by someone, and I never found out who nominated me. And then you have to sort of pitch yourself, and then there's a little bit of a selection, and then they notify you. And when they notify you, that's when they tell you that there's only 10 judges per category. So it's like pretty
great.
Cool honor to be finally awarded for my judgmentalness.
Exactly.
I felt seen.
Aw, they saw the real you. But that is an honor, because when you think about it, how many comedians are there in Canada? To be one of 10, like, wow.
Yeah,
incredible.
It's huge. It's huge. Yeah, it was recognition, I think, for the work that myself and my wife have done here in Vancouver over the years, producing our show. And I'm honored and grateful still.
Aw, that's so nice.
And there were like 5 albums to choose from, right?
Well, actually, and this is something that I wish they would change, but I think it's sort of too much change for the Junos. But so you know how with the Polaris Music Prize, there's a long list and a short list? It's the same actually with the Junos. There's a long list that's given to the judges. So there's something like 30 or 40 albums that you have to wade through. And then you make 10 selections from that. And then from there, they pick the top 5. And then at a later stage, you're given the top 5 and you have to rank them again. And so I think it would be really cool, especially in Canada, where we're all, especially as comedians, essentially constantly searching for credits. I think it would be really great if they released the long list.
Yeah.
But I even sort of tweeted at them that they should do that. But I don't imagine that they will. But yeah, there is a long list and a short list that comes. There's sort of 2 rounds of judging, and so when you get to the short list, it's a lot easier. But
it's almost like the Miss Universe contest, right? Like, even if I was ever chosen to be on it and I was like one of the top 30, even if I never made it past that, I'd still want to be shouting to the world, like, look, I was like on this show. I was in the running. So
yeah, it does seem like a missed opportunity, especially, there's just so much work that goes into even making an album in this country, or anywhere probably. And so it seems like a missed opportunity, but
well, we'll call up our friends at the Junos and get them working on that. Right? Could you imagine, Julie? Who? From where? Who are you? We'll start a petition. No.
Exactly. Change.org.
Yeah.
So
that's fun.
Yeah. So it was. Yeah. It's a delight. It's a great credit.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Obviously, with a credit like that, I mean. What's your whole journey been like?
Right. So the first time I did stand up was 2014. I took a stand up class, but before that, I knew I wanted to do stand up, but I wasn't quite sure sort of how to get into it. And so um, I decided to sort of experiment a little bit with performing not stand up. And so there's this amazing producer in town here called named Sarah Bino, and she runs this show called Teen Angst Night. And the setup is basically that you read from your actual teenage diaries, which thankfully I have lots of. And so I like made the journey back home to Calgary where my folks live, and
Cool.
and grabbed them, and then sort of picked a bunch of entries and did them. And I've done many of them over the years since, because it's actually such a fun show. But yeah, it was my first experience performing, and I quite deliberately picked something where I was like, okay, I get to read, so I don't have to memorize anything, and I have this like cute, ironic distance from the material because I was 12 or whatever. And so, but you get to experience kind of like stage fright and laughter and the rush of performance and all of that, without necessarily having to show up with stand-up material, which is always harder. So, but yeah, and then I started out in 2014. I took a stand-up class, which was less instructional and more just like having a little pod of people who practiced every week together and then did a show together. And then, you know, life has sort of gone on. I'm, you know, stand-up isn't really a money-making job. So as work has permitted, I have been more and less into the scene. And then things really picked up in 2017 when there was this show at this venue that I really enjoyed going to. And, you know, when you're sort of a queer comic and like, you know, sort of like lefty Vancouver, that kind of thing, like, you know, sometimes you just don't want to see certain comics, or like it's important to know who's on the lineup to decide whether or not you want to go to the show. And so there was this show at this cute venue that I really liked going to, but he would never publicize who was on the lineup until the very last minute, or like it just sort of seemed like the marketing wasn't really part of it. And so after the show one day, I went up just as an audience member. I went up and was like, hey, I really love this show and I really love this room, and like, do you need any help with the social media? Like, can I help you with the Instagram? And like, you know, I'd love to just sort of support this space. And literally he was like, do you want to take over this room?
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, like basically like that night he was like, oh, I'll look into it, let me get back to you. And then the next day he was like, do you want to produce a show here? And I was like, yes, I do. I just said yes. And so so basically he was looking at, as it turns out, to kind of move on to other stuff. And I was grateful for the opportunity, because producing is like, that's the fun stuff. Like producing is, you know, inviting all the people that you really want to see and creating a nice flow for the evening, and like being a host. Like I really love that. And so, so yeah, that was when we took over the show and its name. So it was called Foxhole Comedy. And we did that for, I don't know, a couple years. And then we changed the name to New Moon Comedy. And then the pandemic hit. And so there was nothing for a long time. And then when we came back, we were at a different venue and we were called Havana Moon Comedy, because it was a venue called Havana Restaurant and Theater. And then, and now we've sort of blossomed and we do outdoor shows called Full Moon Comedy. And now we're back at the old venue doing New Moon again. And so there's all kinds of things, but it's all sort of like under this umbrella of moon-based comedy,
So
which is
you change the name every quarter?
yeah, exactly.
Right.
As the stars
align, right?
Yeah.
That's funny.
That's great. So you're busy. Holy
well,
moly,
we were more busy. So we were doing, so Foxhole used to be weekly. And then the pandemic came and then everything changed. And then the show that we started up when we came back, we were like, oh, we'll take it easy and we'll just do a bi-weekly show. And then I added back in the old venue. So then there were 3 shows a month. And I've since moved away from the old new venue. So there's just one show a month now that I'm doing, that I'm hosting. And in terms of performing as a stand-up, that's even more rare. And it really just depends on when I'm kind of in the mood to work on some material. And then I'll investigate some shows to get on and go get on some shows.
Yeah. Do you enjoy that part though? Like if you were just to do, a solo stand-up thing?
Just straight stand-up, yeah.
Yeah.
I really do. But in the same way that I think most people enjoy stand-up, which is that they find it kind of nauseating and stressful and anxiety producing.
Yeah.
And then they do it and then they're like, oh, I love this.
Right.
Yeah. So I love it, but it's like kind of a sick passion, I would say.
The whole lead up thing.
Yeah.
It's like it brings you to the top and then boom.
Oh yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Were there a lot of changes? Like, did you do any online comedy during the pandemic at all?
Sort of. I did a kind of, it didn't end up being very funny, to be honest, but I did try to do a show. I think I even made a name for it, but it was sort of like New Moon Balcony, and I would like record FaceTimes with people. Cool. I would have they were Instagram lives. So I would chat with a comedian or two, and have a nice little like live half hour, 45 minutes. But it ended up just being sort of like, how are you? Are you okay? Like, what's up for you? And like just sort of check-ins rather than something more comedic. But we did those for a while, and I had Deanne Smith was a highlight. We had Deanne Smith on, and that kind of faded out as like, I don't know, phase 3.2 of the pandemic moved on, and I was kind of like, I no longer feel the need to sort of create content. But honestly, looking back at the pandemic, like, even though, yes, acknowledging it's definitely still ongoing, but at the kind of first year and a half of it, part of me lately is just like, was I manic for like a full year? Like, this is the feeling that like after the sort of initial shock of it, then there was, because I so clearly remember the day that I was like, oh, no, everything has changed now. Like, there was definitely a day for me where I was like, comedy has just exploded. Like, we're not going to be able to do this for however long. And I just remember, being obviously very devastated, but, we all went through this big trauma and we're going to be unpacking it for the rest of our lives, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'll never forget that, like watching other provinces or even into the States. And we were on our third lockdown in Ontario. And I'm like, are we ever going to be able to like go out in public? And we participated in a weekly Zoom call that was a bunch of comedy friends that was hilarious. And that really helped me, and I think Laura, get through so much of the pandemic. Yeah. And we watched online comedy a bit and whatever, like live shows on Zoom. But I remember just like one night sitting there and I'm like, I don't want to wear a mask for the rest of my life. And I don't want to be stuck in my house. I want to go out for dinner. I want to see my friends. I want to go see comedy.
Yeah.
And it was like, is this ever going to happen? Like, what's going on? You nailed it, that it was brutal. And I think we kind of just brush it by like, oh, it's done with. And now the world's open again and everything's okay. And it's like,
crazy. That's why we started doing outdoor shows this year, because there's still tons of people, obviously everyone who's immunocompromised, like who still can't really go into large group settings, and so but felt a bit more comfortable with an outdoor show. And so we did, because of the rain, we had to cancel the first one, but planning an outdoor show in Vancouver is bananas. But we did two of them last summer, one in July that was super fun and successful, and one in September that was like also super fun, slightly less successful because less people wanted to be outside in September, even though it's still quite nice. But they were an attempt to kind of expand who can come, because that was also another sort of deliberation coming out of the pandemic, was sort of, how do you produce shows that are accessible and sort of like as safe as possible, recognizing or balancing, I guess, the kind of need really to sort of host and produce and gather and laugh and share stories and be in the same space, with the need to kind of be a little bit more thoughtful about seating and masks and capacity and all sorts of stuff. So it continues to be tricky to navigate. I would say we haven't nailed it or anything like that, but it's just sort of rolled on.
Yeah. No, it's amazing because you're known as a force in the comedy world in Vancouver, and you're helping to shape and change the industry, and like doing little things like this and making your shows more inclusive and welcoming to everyone. Like, what motivated you to do that? Because there's got to be something inside of you that's like, I need to be the one that initiates this change. I need to be the one that helps get this going.
I don't know. I mean, thank you for those kind words. I don't know. I'm just always, I'm like kind of an anxious person. So I'm always sort of teasing out the scenario and trying to, move through the world in the conscientious way. And that extends to producing. So, I think, I don't know. I'm not sure how to answer that question, to be honest. Like, I think that's just who I am.
That's awesome. Well, you definitely have a genuine warmth about you, like right away from the first time we talked. It's like you radiate a warmth and an energy that's very friendly and open, and you're awesome. Like, this is great. I see big things happening, even bigger, because you are doing big things already. So that's great.
The first time too.
On my bank account.
Yeah, right. Oh, the comedians' Achilles heel, right? Is their bank account.
Yeah.
And the first time I think I ever saw you was during one of the CanCom symposiums. And that's when I reached out, and because again, there was a personality there that I thought, wow, we got to talk to this person.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
I was so stoked to be asked to be part of that. Andrea Jin was the comedian who is a Vancouver comedian who's now moved to LA and is doing great things and having all the success she deserves. I think she probably was the one who included me in that, and that was a real honor to be part of. And it was so weird, to be honest, that like Mark Breslin was there, and and also some other big promoter guy that a few people knew that I didn't know, and the vibe was like a little
tense.
Interesting.
No, I 100% agree.
Yeah, we walked it, Laura and I, after that, because we both attended it virtually, obviously, and we're like, wow, Mark Breslin, like I'm kind of, this sounds very callous, but I was kind of surprised that he was still alive. And then Mark is gonna like, Ixnay Julie on the list. But it was like, and he's definitely an interesting individual. Like,
I mean, power in the Canadian comedy industry is concentrated in so few hands, and he truly has so much. And I think it's diminishing over time as people find various ways to kind of get themselves out there and be seen and be appreciated.
People like you and a few of our other guests that we've had on that are pushing the boundaries and standing up for comedians and trying to change the world in Canada in comedy. And that's pretty much what motivated Laura and I to start doing this, because we were kind of fringe in the comedy world, and we just saw the inequities and, again, the imbalance in power, and there's representation, and there can be a seedy dark side, like any entertainment industry. Like, we're not just picking on comedians.
Absolutely. Like, hello, me too. It's rife in this industry.
Absolutely. And it's like, let's kind of, in our own small little way, and hopefully it will one day be a much bigger way, bring forward some of these people who are really initiating change and helping to make it better for everyone and make it more fair and make it more equitable and all of the rest of that fun stuff. So
I mean, I'll be the first one to say I definitely have my haters, but like I think that's kind of like if you do anything in the world, you're going to get people who don't like what you're doing, and so you just kind of have to roll on. But yeah, one of the things, it seems sort of, I don't know, these things, the older I get, and I'm 41 now, the older I get, the more I'm kind of like, things change so fast. So like 5 years ago, or I guess coming up on 6 years ago, when we started our show, like when I was handed the show, with, you know, I honored the bookings for like a couple weeks of the previous guy, and then I started booking it my own way, and I made a poster and I did everything, and I was like, this is the show where the majority of the time is women, non-binary people, queers, and people of color. That's what this show is. And like put it on the poster, put it on the postcards and everything. And so the idea was to start appealing to people who actually don't like going to comedy because it's generally so kind of sexist, transphobic, racist, misogynist, all of these sort of fatphobic, all of these sort of things that comedy very much still can be and is to a lot of people, but it certainly doesn't have to be.
No.
And so we both sort of like recruited a bunch of comedians who were interested in that vibe, but also an audience who was really hungry for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so that's been the through line, I think, for me, is trying to use the, I don't know, drive I have to produce shows, you know, for the, to kind of increase the amount of people in the scene.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in sort of like in that thread of bringing certain people together, I wanted to talk a little bit more about your Telus project and how that all came about, and how everyone who got involved felt about it at first, and then how it must have mushroomed.
A little bit. I mean, it's still, you know, I mean, it's still just something on Telus and on YouTube, but like, yeah, so it started off with me pitching with 10 people, and then a couple of them, Andrea Jin was one of them, and she ended up moving to LA, and so it was sort of like she was already on her way, and she didn't really, you know, it didn't end up working out that we could film her. And another person who'd also moved to California. But so we ended up with 8 people, and I pitched the project with all of them already on board, and so I think that's what helped. And these are like micro grants. This was $10,000 to produce a docu-series, 8 episodes.
I'm laughing because I have a little bit of experience in the film industry and television, and $10,000 is like, so we're ordering the crew lunch.
Totally. Yeah.
You know, today.
Yeah. So basically the sort of scope and the scale of what I could produce had to be really lean. And so what, you know, the approach that I took, and like I went to film school and I worked in the industry, and so like I have a, you know, and I've made an experimental short film, as we all should have, and so, you know, I know a little bit about production and that kind of thing, and so we filmed a stand-up show with all of the comedians on it, and then we had 2 days of interviews where we filmed everybody's interviews, and then each episode, it just features one person's stand-up set and their interview, and that's the episode.
Yeah.
So there's 8 episodes of each person's stand-up set and interviews, and it's like, we're not sort of reinventing the wheel in terms of the format of the project, but it came together really nicely, and it, you know, we had a big screening, and I was so grateful. We had a big screening at a venue that's like considerably bigger than the venue that I normally host shows at, and so we were like down to the individual ticket. We made back the cost of the venue. Like we basically sold out the room, and and we're able to pay for the cost of the venue through that. So, you know, it ended up being a nice way to launch the show. And so yeah, so season 1 is out there, and then I went back and got another gorgeous $10,000 for a second season, which we've also already filmed, and now I'm editing, and I think that one comes out sometime this summer. They're a little opaque about it, but it'll be summer or maybe September.
I love the name of it too, because not only is it those are the call letters for the airport, correct?
That's right.
And then, but if you put on a little German accent, you've got the play on words, right? YVR Funny.
YVR Funny.
Very nice. Well, it's funny. I actually did. I did for the first season. Actually treat it like an acronym, like you're very really funny.
Okay. Yeah.
But ultimately it ended up because I don't know, because of TV, like having things with brackets, it doesn't really work, and so it's just ended up being YVR Funny. But having it like a really long title for a show also doesn't really work on TV. So
No. The whole thing is just so well executed. I love it. I watched it. I've watched it a couple times actually because
that's great.
Just on you. I think it was on YouTube. I must have been.
Yeah,
that's where it's available, right?
Yeah.
It had to be because it was a while back. But I just it's just seamless. It's seamless.
Yeah. Like when you told me how you filmed it, I'm like, really? It didn't seem, I don't know. I was like, I wouldn't have known that was one show that was split into each of the 8 episodes. So great job.
Great. Thank you so
Very
much.
cool.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, Telus, do you guys have Telus out in Ontario, or is it just
No,
okay?
That's
Yeah,
my
so
cell phone provider. Tell us.
yeah, so Telus, they're in Alberta and BC for I think a decade now. They've been kind of quite involved in funding filmmaking and things like that, and I think they've gotten.
Do they fund podcasts?
They do actually. They actually do, but
probably Vancouver podcast though.
But it's typically just Alberta and BC.
Yeah.
Okay.
Unfortunately,
That's okay.
Okay. Shut up.
Yeah, move to Alberta. I don't know. No, but yeah, this particular stream was sort of really directed at people who are like they're trying to go for people who are on TikTok or people who are like YouTubers and have like YouTube shows and stuff like that. And I was just kind of like, I need to do something creative and I need to get back into filmmaking and stuff like that. And I want to, and quite frankly, producing shows for a number of years, you sort of start to realize where the gaps are in the industry, and having really good video of your performances is not like there's a level where it doesn't have to be really good video. It doesn't have to be like 5 angles and like all of this sort of stuff for it to work, but being able to submit to things with good video is really helpful. And so I thought I wanted to make a project that would also be useful to the people in it. So each participant, in addition to like having this episode, they also I also sort of gave them the footage of their performance, and so they can go and apply to all sorts of things with it. And I think that's been helpful.
Awesome.
Wow.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, the hope is to, I mean, I don't know if I want to do it for a 3rd season yet. I'm not quite sure, but the hope is to just be able to kind of help give more credits to more sort of shine to more games.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the World Wide Web opens it up to everyone, right?
Yeah, and if you make something really nice and kind of easy to consume, like the episodes are about 20 minutes, and you just get to know people a little bit better, and that was the idea.
That's great. That is really, really great. So a little bit off topic, but tell us about your relationship with Japan. I noticed on one of your blogs, or not blogs, but one of the articles that was written about you, your website, talks about your Japan journey and your amazing Halloween costume that we were all blown away by.
Because we love sushi.
Yes, I haven't been asked about Japan in a long time. I went to university here and studied modern European studies and German, and then immediately upon graduating went to Japan, which makes no sense.
Yeah.
But I just,
I can see the connection. Germany, Japan,
Honestly, when I was in my
World
interview,
opposite ends of the world.
Sorry,
the
go
Japanese
ahead.
people did not like this, but in my interview with them, 'cause I had previously also lived in Germany, and so they were like, "You've lived in Germany and you're studying German. Why do you want to come to Japan?" And I was like, "Well, if I just go to Italy after this, then I've got the whole axis wrapped up." And
Oh,
they did not find that funny.
that's
No
awesome.
laughs. But yeah, to be quite honest, it was sort of one of those things where it was like, I don't know, I was 24 and all my friends were moving to Japan to teach English, and it sort of seemed like, oh, a job, and
So
like
cool.
seems kind of nice. And I was planning to only just go for a year, and then the more you start to learn the language, the more you start to sort of appreciate things and make friends and make connections. And so then I stayed a second year as a teacher. And then I was sort of like, and I was living in a beautiful small town called Onomichi, which is not far from Hiroshima. So sort of like on the coast, on the eastern side of or sort of southern eastern side of the main island. And then I was sort of like, well, teaching isn't really for me. Like, I didn't love it anymore. And I was like, okay, maybe I'll move to Tokyo and find some other job to do. Fell in love with someone, and I was like, okay, I'm moving to Tokyo. And then I honestly, I think this is sort of luck, privilege, a bunch of things all together. But like, I got a job as a copy editor at a English language newspaper.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and so I was an editor for 2 years at an English language daily newspaper in Japan, which was an awesome job. Honestly, one of my favorite jobs I've ever had. And then that was sort of 2008 and 9, and sort of recession time kicked in, and I was offered an early retirement, and so I retired at 26.
Oh, wow.
And took my retirement money and moved to London, where I lived for another 2 years, and finished off that relationship, and then moved back to Canada. I went to film school. So Japan was just sort of like a place to go, and it ended up being a beautiful experience and an amazing 4 years of my life. But and I was able to, with the connections that I made at the newspaper, I was able to continue writing for them for quite a long time. So I was like a columnist in Japan for about a decade.
Well, that's great.
Very
cool. And like really got to write about really banal, like life things. Like, like I was sort of like, I would just write about, I mean, I had a bunch of different style of columns. So there was one that was like, me traipsing around Japan, like investigating different sort of traditional arts, and kind of like learning, like how do you make those Japanese umbrellas, and like, or how do you make the Japanese like fake food, those like little samples of sushi and ramen and everything. And then there was one where I tried to do different challenges. Like I was like, what if I stop eating or stop having caffeine for a week, which was traumatic.
I'm like, yeah, I would do that.
Terrible. I was a monster. Withdrawal is no joke off caffeine.
No.
But anyway, so yeah, like just life stuff. It was a total dream, to be honest. But yeah, so I have no desire to sort of move back to Japan and live there again, although I have been back to visit once, and I would love to go back again. Like, it's an amazing country, beautiful people. Yeah. Loved it.
But nothing to joke about.
Life. Yeah,
I lived the whole life. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Really have. Yeah.
Okay. And do you freak people out when you go to Japanese restaurants, and you like, do you understand them still, or have you lost that part of it? Yeah. Do you answer them back? I mean,
my Japanese speaking level, I plateaued at kind of like a really good conversation with a taxi driver kind of thing. Like, or the way I would explain it is like, I can go into a store and ask you what I want, or like the best way to describe it is like, I can tell you which part of the sentence I didn't understand.
Okay.
Which is like a whole thing.
Stop.
Communicate with people.
Better than me. My Japanese is limited to counting to 10, knowing how to pronounce words, and anything else that I learned from Shogun. Which is probably before your time.
Dude, mine is domo arigato from the song.
Yeah, I mean, there's only so many expressions that you really need to. This is the thing. Like, I would, you get to know a lot of non-Japanese people also when you're there, which has like expanded my network internationally quite a bit. I have lots of places to stay all over, which is gorgeous.
That's nice.
In fact, I was just watching that Netflix show, The Mole. Did you guys?
I haven't seen it.
I've heard of it.
Stupid game show, whatever. But I was like, I know that person, and there was somebody on that game show who I knew from Japan, who was like American. But I was like, Casey, you were in Japan with me.
Very cool.
It's weird, yeah. Anyway, it was
like for couples or something, or not, or
no. The Mole is like the Mole is like 10 people competing to sort of like add money to a pot, but like there's somebody in the mix who's trying to sabotage them the whole time.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Anyway, I mean,
okay.
It was like I was looking for something to fold laundry to.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's
I heard that's a good one for that.
Yeah, they don't film reality shows in Vancouver, do they?
Funny you should mention this. I have worked on a reality show that was filmed here, or a couple.
Oh, really?
But yeah, in my filmmaking days. But there was this show, I don't think it did very well. I think there was only one season. There was this show called The Audience, and it was based off a British show of the same name, where, or was it called The Audience? Yeah, I think it was called The Audience, where there's a sort of visual gag, which is that there's a person trying to make a big life decision, and then there's like 50 strangers, like total random people, who kind of follow them around and help and like vote on their decision. And like, there's sort of these contrived situations where they meet family members of this person and like get to ask them questions and stuff like that. So people were trying to make decisions like, should I become a life coach? Or like, should I do artificial insemination and have a kid before I turn 40? Or like, should I quit my job and become a comedian, was one of them.
And so random people make the decision for you?
Like the premise is like the audience makes a determination, and then you do it or not do it, obviously. But like,
okay.
Yeah, so I helped. I was a PA, I think, on that show, or a driver on that show.
Yeah.
And it was weird, but
that's fun.
Yeah. So I mean, there's obviously quite a big filmmaking scene here, but it's mostly movies and TV. Yeah.
So we have to ask: are you an optimist, a pessimist, or a realist?
Unfortunately, I'm an optimist. I think there's something sort of broken about me, really, that I always sort of try to find the best case scenario. I also think maybe there's something like white privilege-y about kind of being like, oh, this will work out, like, but ultimately, I think I'm sort of built. Maybe it's being a youngest sibling. I think I always sort of.
The way was paved for you as the youngest sibling, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think, and also just like being a little bit goofier. I think.
Yeah.
Oh, how many are there ahead of you?
Just one. I just have one older sister, but and not much older, 2 years older, but she, she did pave the way for me, and I don't know. Yeah, I'd say optimist.
Younger children do tend to have that, like, oh, I can do anything, because mom and dad are like, oh, you're so cute, because the first one's always the one that challenges, or generally the one that challenges the parents. So by the time the second one gets there, you're just exhausted. You're like, you're the best. You're great. You can do it. Go ahead, sweetie. I
think that's fair. I think that's accurate. I definitely got a lot less, just a lot less sort of concern from my parents, a lot less like kind of angst. I pushed the boundaries a lot more than my sister ever would have been able to get away with. And so, but yeah, I also just have always been a bit, I think the word is like plucky. Like I'm always a little bit, well, why don't we do it that way? And then just do it, you know? So like, even when people ask me about my like event producing experience, I always go back to the story of like being in grade 6. So I'm like, I don't know, 11 or 12. And my grade 6 teacher, it was the end of the year and we were supposed to have an end of the year party, field trip or something, and our teacher decided to cancel it because he was too busy. And I was kind of like, well, can we plan it? Like, I was like, can I plan it? And he was like, go for it. And so I planned it. Like, I went to Costco and I arranged a school bus, and we went to this beautiful park and had like a barbecue and like played games. And it was, I got like permission forms for parents, and like I was sort of like, why don't we, like, it just didn't seem hard to me. And so I think that's a little baby producer.
Yeah.
Like,
good for you.
Themselves.
You know what, though? But that's also your optimist. And
I think so.
There's nothing stopping you. And I don't look at that as a negative or a broken thing at all. It's like
we need more of you.
You envision it and you make things happen because you feel good about it. And that's, to me, optimism is a positive.
Yeah. I mean,
as long as you're not taken advantage of, right?
Because I wouldn't be liking you if you were a pessimist. I could tell you weren't.
Yeah. Well, we always used to tease my mom for being a pessimist, but she was a realist. Like, she was a nurse, and she was like the second youngest of 7, and she just had a rough childhood. And I think she just sort of was always like, there's danger, like there's risk, things could go wrong. And in retrospect, I appreciate her for, it was actually sort of comedic at some point. Like, my mom would sort of always be trusted on to be the kind of, but this terrible thing could happen or whatever. And it was like,
did she grow up in Vancouver as well?
No, she grew up in Saskatoon.
Okay.
That explains a lot. No, I'm just joking. Saskatoon's beautiful.
I think they're like the, what do you call it? The fulcrum of the country.
I'd give that to Winnipeg, to be honest. I think they're the belly button, really.
Okay.
Oh, that's it. You should write the Winnipeg Board of Trades for tourism and be like, hey, we have this great new slogan, the belly button of Canada, visit Winnipeg.
Yeah, exactly. Does
that make Alberta the boobs?
Yeah, maybe.
I'm just
thinking. Oh, then what's Ontario?
Would probably say so.
No, but I'm thinking of the mountains, right?
Yeah.
There.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Topographically, indeed.
Whereas the East Coast is the fishtail
Oh.
of the mermaid, right? Like, if we're looking at it that way, I'm just saying. Could be a merman. I don't know.
A merperson.
Murmur person.
Murmur person.
Like, the eyebrows. I don't know.
Yeah.
The big.
Always surprised.
Country. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, we'll have to do a TikTok about that now, because there was a gal on Instagram, a Toronto comedian, who did zodiac signs relative to cities of Canada. Like,
cool.
Or different cities in Canada, mostly Ontario, but still.
Yeah.
So
interesting.
That's Hillary, I think. Hillary Henderson. But anyway, this is not about her.
No. Do you find that you ever get sick of being the one that has to plan everything? Like being a producer, and do you find that it just like overwhelms your entire life? Or so I'm a retail manager. I'm the one within my friend group that I'm always the one that's like, okay, everybody, let's get together. We're going to do it this night. Everybody's going to come, blah, 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 blah. But then I just get to the point some days where I'm like, I don't want to make a decision anymore. Like, just leave me alone. I need time to like somebody else make all the decisions, plan something. I'll show up.
Yeah. Yes and no. I would say, like, in my marriage, I'm a little bit more like, that's where that gets offset. Like, I'm kind of like the sous chef. Like,
okay, awesome.
Like, I just like to be told what to chop.
Yeah.
And like not have to create the meal.
Good.
So in that setting, that's sort of the reverse. But I think, like it was for everyone, the pandemic was quite an emotional journey for me. And one of the things I definitely clocked and changed over the course of the last few years is sort of getting a better sense of what I'm capable of and what I'm interested in doing. And so being pretty in touch with what I have capacity for is important to me. And so that's why recently I shifted from having 3 shows a month to just 1 because I wanted to be able to. So much of producing too is just sort of sitting in the unknown, like not knowing whether or not you're going to sell out your venue, or not knowing whether or not a comedian's going to message you the night of and say they're sick or can't do it, or having anxiety or having IBS or whatever. And like, just that's a lot of tension to sit with all the time. And so segmenting that into just sort of 1 day a week or 1 week a month is a little easier to handle. And also I just, with the filmmaking stuff, I just wanted to be able to focus a little bit more on, you know, where my worry goes. And so so
that makes sense. Is that where so you're focusing more on making films right now?
That's
getting
kind of
the gist of.
I mean, it's sort of like, because it's comedy related, it's not a departure ultimately, but it is a totally different kind of set of activities, and requires a different level of focus. But yeah, I would say that's more where my attention is going. I don't know if I, you know, like, I looked at comedy and I was like, I'm never going to make money here. Let's go to documentary film.
Yeah.
This is
but is there a lot of money in documentary filmmaking? I'm like, girl, like,
unless you sell it to Netflix.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, I think, being able to sort of hone my skills as a filmmaker is really important to me. And I think maybe more where my career is going, but I'm certainly keeping a foot in a number of different doors.
Yeah, I'm glad that we found you, because we will be following your journey.
Well, I appreciate it.
And see where you go with it. Obviously, Canada needs more people like you. And we need more representation throughout everything, through film, through documentaries, through producing shows, being in shows. It's a good thing. It's a really good thing.
I mean, I genuinely struggle sometimes with my own you know, feeling like I'm the person that people need to hear from. Like that's part of why I like to highlight other people as a practice, like, because I'm not so sure that, like, yes, I'm non-binary, and yes, I'm queer, and yes, I'm you know, grew up having a female experience, but like I think, you know, and all of these things are underrepresented. But I think, you know, in some ways I feel a little bit like, you know, white folks are still dominating in entertainment, and maybe I don't need to be heard from as much. And so that's part of why, or how I kind of approach that, is to make my focus or my projects about lifting other people up and using my energy in that way. And so, you know, ultimately, I don't know whether or not there's like, I think my stand-up is really the only area where I'm creating from myself, about myself.
But everybody who does something great, in the fact that, like, the way that you're doing it, and that you're promoting others and you're pushing them forward, you still deserve the recognition too. You know what I mean? And it's nice to hear from people like, really, we didn't know each other before this. And just from like listening to your journey and what you're trying to do and what you've already accomplished, like, that's amazing. And you deserve the accolades, because good for you. You're taking that stand, and it's opening that door for maybe someone that is in another aspect of the spectrum of what we are in Canada, to step up and go, you know what? I saw them, and they're doing this, and they're doing such a great job. I think I can do it.
Yeah.
You know?
Mean, that's yeah.
And that's great.
I always think, like, maybe this is a little bit getting into that cynical side, but like, I used to go to queer film festivals a lot, and I used to honestly think, like, I can do better than this, you know, like, and so, but then I tried, and I was like, oh no, it's very hard. It's actually very difficult. But then, you know, you get better, and you try harder, and you do different things.
Jackie, I saw one of your films, and I think it's you narrating it through the whole thing, and it takes you to different intersections. That is a masterpiece.
Oh, thank you.
Like, that was from a while back too, is it not?
Yeah. Probably 2015, 2016. Yeah.
I mean, it was very calm. and it just gave a good mood, like
Mhm.
a good feeling despite anything else that might have been going on. I
Thank
mean, the whole
you.
thing was just it just I was entranced by it.
Oh,
Like,
I appreciate that. I appreciate
yes.
that a lot. Yeah.
So don't doubt yourself in any way, shape, or form. I mean, I
Um,
think, you know,
Yeah.
get feedback from other people,
right.
and you'll realize that if you're being harder on yourself than you think you need to be, or whatever.
This is beautiful. I'm going to be replaying this to myself
Oh.
Yeah,
all the
do.
time.
We all need to raise each other up, like
Yeah.
absolutely.
Hmm.
And the world is big enough at pushing us all down
That's
that it's nice to have people that are in your corner that support you and recognize what you're doing for others. And it's great. And you're
thank you.
inspiring. So
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah.
thank you.
I I keep meeting people in the industry who are like you two who you know are just out there trying to lift people up and do good things and stay involved and learn new stuff and it's exciting. Yeah, it's inspiring.
We're
Yay.
trying. We're trying.
Like you. We're all just in it to make things better,
Yeah.
Right?
right?
Yeah, because we're not making
So
money. We're not making money
we're
from
making
this.
no money doing this.
Yeah, exactly. That's how you
Nothing.
know it's worth doing, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah, exactly. I agree
Absolutely.
100%. Yeah.
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 So, Jackie, what advice would you give to someone starting out in comedy and maybe filmmaking,
Yeah.
or even maybe just getting the travel bug? I don't know.
Right.
Done so much. It's
I know. I'm like envious of your life. Like, really.
um, you know, yeah, I think the older I get, the more sort of cautious I get, and so I think there's something to be said for throwing away caution, especially when it comes to say like traveling or learning another language or whatever. You just have to kind of dive in, really, and when the same is true really for comedy or for filmmaking. You really have to just sort of commit to it, I think, and give yourself a bit of leeway to not be great. I mean, it's that old Ira Glass quote that's sort of like, you have an artistic sensibility, which means like you know what's good and you feel frustrated when you're not good, but like it takes time to get good. Like
Mhm.
if anything, I think it takes time to, and I definitely don't want to represent myself as a particularly excellent stand-up comedian. I think I'm funny, but I think that I don't have a lot of, or I'm not the type of comedian who I get bored with material really quickly, so I sort of write new material all the time and
Mhm.
try it out
Mhm.
and give it a go and move on really quickly. And so I don't have a lot of polish, I think, when it comes to comedy. Like I've never been approached to make an album, for example. And
Well, you'd have to do that just on your own, right?
yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
You gotta just,
Because you can.
I suppose. Yeah, I
Yeah,
suppose.
nothing's stopping.
Yeah, well,
Just you.
yeah, it's true. No, it's true. I mean, and I think that this is the advice, right? Like you have to kind of look at what's holding you back. And
Mhm.
I think there's a combination of like being afraid to be seen and like needing to be seen,
Oh,
right?
true.
And
That's
so
true.
I think
Yeah.
it's this sort of blend. And when it comes specifically to comedy, though, I would also advise people to it can't it, or if you're in a place where there's a stand-up class, like it's not so much that you learn anything that you need to know or that you can't already assume. It's more about finding a cohort.
Yeah.
I would say like it can be really helpful to find one or two other people who are at the same stage or the same sort of level as you and kind of team up to go places and do things like this. Yeah, that can really go a long way in terms of you need a support network, really. And
Mhm.
it's very hard to be just like on your own.
Absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
that's how Laura and I met, right? So we did improv classes together. And then from there, I bugged the guy that was doing the classes. I'm like, do a stand-up class, do a stand-up class, do a stand-up class. And then there was four of us that ended up really taking off from there. And we just had a blast. And like Laura and I became fast friends 6 or 7 years ago now, and haven't looked back. And I know that if she ever decides to get back on the stage and do her stand-up, I will be there to support her. I will not be joining her, but I will support her, because stand-up sucks when you're a comedian. It's not my bag. But Laura definitely can be very, very funny. So, and it's true. Be there, have your cohort. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's always, I mean, and this is the interesting thing to me too about the pandemic. I thought, oh, no one's going to want to do comedy after this. But even during the pandemic, there were people who were like, oh, actually, what I need to do is comedy.
Yeah.
And so there just always are people coming up who are interested in getting out there and expressing themselves. And, so yeah, so don't be afraid.
There's so many ways to do it.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there really are. It's such a, and another thing too to keep in mind for folks who are like on the fence about whether or not they should do it. First of all, just do it. And second of all, it's pretty low stakes. Like ultimately, you know, you kind of, you just have an experience with some people in a room and it's over.
Exactly.
You don't ever have to do anything again, and you don't have to record it. You don't have to put it out in the world. You don't have to, you know, just go and give it a try, and you'll survive.
That's awesome.
You might even love it.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you'd like to mention or talk about before we wrap today up?
I feel like you guys have plugged all my yeah. I mean, yeah, I'll give a shout out to our Instagram, Moon-Based Comedy. That's where that's the sort of home for all of the various projects that we put together. But I also have a separate Instagram for the show, which is YVR Funny. That's the whole thing. And yeah, I don't know, my website.
That's awesome. Yeah, we're going to list all the links on any supporting platforms that we have. It will list all of the ways to get in contact with you or to follow you, watch you. That's awesome.
Yeah, if you have like too many numbers in your thing, I'll probably block you. If people, people are following me that are just like bots and trolls, and I'm just block. I'm not interested in having like 1 million followers. I'm like, no, only real people.
No, I know. I get that all the time. Mostly I don't know who these men are that follow me. Men with dogs. It's like
they're bots.
Yeah, I know. I just please stop.
I'd like to have a conversation with one of them one time and then somehow turn it into a routine. I think that would be really funny to see where you could take it all, but I digress. Anyways, we're going to thank you, Jackie. It was such a pleasure meeting you. You really are a force to be reckoned with. I hope that as you go, you're doing great things, and we appreciate it. And I'm sure that so many people that are in your circle love and appreciate you. And it was such an honor to meet you. And we're going to follow you forever and ever and ever.
Yeah.
So, yay.
Thanks so much, Jackie.
Thank you.
Really
It was such a pleasure.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.